Hi guys, welcome for the video for chapter 2 of The Giver by Lois Lowry. I want to let you know that this video is optional. When we read some of the chapters throughout the book, you do not necessarily need to follow along with me. This is here as a support if you choose to have me read to you. If you want to read independently, chapters 2 and 3 are books that you could read independently on your own. There is a worksheet that goes with both of those. It's a lot different from what we did when we were gathering evidence. It's more just me double checking that you read and have some of the basic information. It's another way to let you keep track of what's happening and get a stronger understanding of what's happening. So let's look at the worksheet quickly since it's the first one you'll be doing like this. So chapters 2 and 3 are on the same paper. I want to remind you to make sure that you fill in the heading, first and last name, class period, and the date that you're starting it. Now, over here in the first column, I have put what chapter it is for, so you don't have to write anything in this column. So we're starting with chapter 2. In this column, it's just notes, okay? Just bulleted notes is fine. So setting, I want to know where and when. And where, almost every time we might have the word community, but where within the community. When we talk about time, a lot of times people think, I don't know what year it is, because it's a, dystopian or utopian society set in the future. We don't really have a time frame, but we do have a time of day. Okay, so keep that in mind. And chapter 2 is going to pick up where chapter 1 left off. Remember that we're sharing the evening telling of feelings after dinner. So we've got some of that information. In the next column, I just want you to list the characters that are involved. Now, often in chapters, characters will be mentioned. I don't need you to put them unless they are actually part of the chapter, not just people that they talk about. For example, in the last chapter, we would not need to include the pilot as a character because there was a story being told about him. He was not an actual character in chapter 1. Now, plot gets a little bit trickier. So we're looking at what is happening in the plot, what is the main event of this chapter. Keep in mind too, that we're still in the exposition of the book. We're still being introduced to all of the information. Now in the exposition, this is where when we learn setting, characters, and then a key part that we're also looking for could be conflict. There isn't really a major problem happening in chapter 2, but we do know at the end of chapter 1 that the parents are going to start discussing something that is bothering Jonas. And I'd like you to be a little specific as far as, what is the event, what happens within this. In this last box, how do setting, character, and or plot interact? So you have to do a little bit of critical thinking here. How do these three things work together to affect the plot? And I give you a question in the box. How does the setting affect or influence the main character? So this time I particularly want you to focus on setting and Jonas. And as far as setting, I don't necessarily mean in this case the time of day. I mean where they live. Keep in mind all these rules and things and different procedures than what we have. How do those things affect Jonas? And I'm just going to point out, because I won't do it in the next video for chapter 3, that the chapter 3 chart is identical to chapter 2. So you'll do the exact same thing for chapter 3. The information will change a little bit based on what you read in chapter 3. All right, so let's take a look at chapter 2. If you choose to read on your own, now would be a good time for you to turn off the video and just read and fill out your chart. I will not be filling the chart out in the videos at all. I made the words a little bit bigger this time because when I rewatched chapter 1, I had trouble seeing it. So hopefully this is a little bit better for you. Chapter 2. Jonas watched as his father poured a fresh cup of coffee. He waited. His father finally said, every December was exciting to me when I was young. And it has been for you and Lily too, I'm sure. Each December brings such changes. Jonas nodded. He could remember the Decembers back to when he had become, well, probably a 4. The earlier ones were lost to him, but he observed them each year and he remembered Lily's earliest Decembers. He remembered when his family received Lily, the day she was named, the day that she had become a one. The ceremony for the ones was always noisy and fun. Each December, all the new children born in the previous year turned one. One at a time, there were always 50 in each year's group. If none had been released, they had been brought to the stage by the nurturers who cared for them since birth. Some were already walking, wobbling on their unsteady legs. Others were no more than a few days old, wrapped in blankets, held by the nurturers. So this paragraph does give us a bunch of information about the community, that this is very different from how we receive children in our family, right? There's actually a process, and that the families are not actually having their own children, are they? I enjoy the naming, Jonas said. His mother agreed, smiling. The year we got Lily, we knew, of course, that we'd receive our female because we'd made our application and been approved. But I'd been wondering what her name would be. I could have sneaked a look at the list prior to the ceremony, Father confided. The committee always makes the list in advance, and it's right there in the office at the nurturing center. As a matter of fact, he went on, I feel a little guilty about this, but I did go in this afternoon and look to see if this year's naming list had been made yet. It was right there in the office, and I looked up number 36. That's the little guy I've been concerned about, because it occurred to me that it might enhance his nurturing if I could call him by a name, just privately, of course, when no one else is around. Did you find it? Jonas was fascinated. It didn't seem a terribly important rule, but the fact that his father had broken a rule at all awed him. He glanced at his mother, the one responsible for adherence to the rules, and was relieved that she was smiling. His father nodded. Her name, if he makes it to the naming without being released, of course, is to be Gabriel. So I whisper that to him when I feed him every 4 hours and during exercise and playtime, if no one can hear me. I call him Gabe, actually, he said and grinned. Gabe. Jonas tried it out. A good name, he decided. Though Jonas had only become a 5 the year that they acquired Lily and learned her name, he remembered the excitement, the conversations at home, wondering about her, how she would look, who she would be, how she would fit into their established family unit. He remembered climbing the steps to the stage with his parents, his father by his side that year instead of with the nurturers, since it was the year that he would be given a new child of his own. He remembered his mother taking the new child, his sister, into her arms while the document was read to the assembled family units. New child 23, the namer had read. Lily. He remembered his father's look of delight and that his father had whispered, she's one of my favorites. I was hoping for her to be the one. The crowd had clapped and Jonas had grinned. He liked his sister's name. Lily, barely awake, had waved her small fist. Then they had stepped down to make room for the next family unit. When I was an 11, his father said now, as you are, Jonas, I was very impatient, waiting for the ceremony of 12. It's a long 2 days. I remember that I enjoyed the ones, as I always do, but that I didn't pay much attention to the other ceremonies, except for my sister's. She became a 9 that year and got her bicycle. I'd been teaching her to ride mine, even though technically I wasn't supposed to. Jonas laughed. It was one of the few rules that was not taken very seriously and was almost always broken. The children all received their bicycles at 9. They were not allowed to ride bicycles before then, but almost always the older brothers and sisters had secretly taught the younger ones. Jonas had been thinking already about teaching Lily. There was talk about changing the rule and giving the bicycles at an earlier age. A committee was studying the idea. When something went to a committee for study, the people always joked about it. They said that the committee members would become elders by the time the rule change was made. Rules were very hard to change. Sometimes, if it was an very important rule, unlike the one governing the age for bicycles, it would have to go eventually to the receiver for a decision. The receiver was the most important elder. Jonas had never even seen him that he knew of. Someone in a position of such importance lived and worked alone, but the committee would never bother the receiver with a question about bicycles. They would simply fret and argue about it for themselves for years until the citizens forgot that it had ever gone to them for study. His father continued. So I watched and cheered when my sister Katya became a 9 and removed her hair ribbons and got her bicycle, father went on. Then I didn't pay much attention to the 10s and 11s. And finally, at the end of the second day, which seemed to go on forever, it was my turn. It was the ceremony of 12. Jonas shivered. He pictured his father, who must have been a shy and quiet boy, for he was a shy and quiet man, seated with his group, waiting to be called to the stage. The ceremony of 12 was the last of the ceremonies, the most important. I remember how proud my parents looked, and my sister too. Even though she wanted to be out riding the bicycle publicly, she stopped fidgeting and was very still and attentive when my turn came. But to be honest, Jonas, his father said, for me, there was not the element of suspense that there is with your ceremony, because I was already fairly certain of what my assignment was to be. Jonas was surprised. There was no way really to know in advance. It was a secret selection made by the leaders of the community, the committee of elders, who took the responsibility so seriously that there were never even any jokes made about assignments. So that's what he's nervous about. He's nervous about getting an assignment. Think about what that might mean. What is an assignment? It's not a homework assignment like I'm giving you right now. It's a little different. His mother seemed surprised too. How could you have known? She asked. His father smiled his gentle smile. Well, it was clear to me, and my parents later confessed that it had been obvious to them too what my aptitude was. Aptitude is one of our vocabulary words. What is ability? What is natural talent is. I had always loved the new children more than anything. When my friends in my age group were holding bicycle races or building toy vehicles or bridges with their construction sets or all the things I do with my friends, Jonas pointed out, and his mother nodded in agreement. I always participated, of course, because as children, we must experience all of those things. And I studied hard in school, as you do, Jonas. But again and again, during free time, I found myself drawn to the new children. I spent almost all of my volunteer hours helping in the nurturing center. Of course, the elders knew that from their observation. Jonas nodded. During the past year, he had been aware of the increasing level of observation. In school, at recreation time, and during volunteer hours, he had noticed the elders watching him and the other 11s. He had seen them taking notes. He knew too that the elders were meeting for long hours with all of the instructors that he and the other 11s had had during their years of school. So I expected it, and I was pleased, but not at all surprised. When my assignment was announced as nurturer, Father explained. Did everyone applaud, even though they weren't surprised? Jonas asked. Oh, of course. They were happy for me that my assignment was what I wanted most. I felt very fortunate. His father smiled. Were any of the 11s disappointed your year? Jonas asked. Unlike his father, he had no idea what his assignment would be, but he knew that some would disappoint him. Though he respected his father's work, nurturer would not be his wish, and he didn't envy laborers at all. So at 12, his assignment is to be his career, and he doesn't get to choose it. I think I'd be a little nervous too. His father thought, no, I don't think so. Of course, the elders are so careful in their observations and selections. I think it's probably the most important job in our community, his mother commented. My friend Yoshiko was surprised by her selection as doctor, Father said, but she was thrilled. And let's see, there was Andre. I remember that when we were boys, he never wanted to do physical things. He spent all the recreation time he could with his construction set, and his volunteer hours were always on building sites. The elders knew that, of course. Andre was given the assignment of engineer, and he was delighted. Andre later designed the bridge that crosses the river to the west of town, Jonas's mother said. It wasn't there when we were children. There are very rarely disappointments, Jonas. I don't think you need to worry about that, his father reassured him. And if there are, you know there's an appeal process. But they all laughed at that. An appeal went to committee for study. I worry a little about Asher's assignment, Jonas confessed. Asher's such fun, but he doesn't really have any serious interests. He makes a game out of everything. His father chuckled. You know, he said, I remember when Asher was a new child at the nurturing center before he was named. He never cried. He giggled and laughed at everything. All of us on the staff enjoyed nurturing Asher. The elders know Asher, his mother said. They'll find exactly the right assignment for him. I don't think you need to worry about him. But Jonas, let me warn you about something that may not have occurred to you. I know I didn't think about it until after my ceremony of 12. What's that? Well, it's the last of the ceremonies, as you know. After 12, age isn't important. Most of us even lose track of how old we are as time passes. Though the information is in the Hall of Open Records and we could go and look it up if we wanted to, what's important is the preparation for adult life and the training you'll receive in your assignment. I know that, Jonas said. Everyone knows that. But it means, his mother went on, that you'll move into a new group, and each of your friends will. You'll no longer be spending your time with your group of 11s. After the ceremony of 12, you'll be with your assignment group, with those in training. No more volunteer hours, no more recreation hours, so your friends will no longer be as close. Jonas shook his head. Asher and I will always be friends, he said firmly, and there will still be school. That's true, his father agreed. But what your mother said is true as well. There will be changes. Good changes, though, his mother pointed out. After my ceremony of 12, I missed my childhood recreation. But when I entered my training for law and justice, I found myself with people who shared my interests. I made friends on a new level, friends of all ages. Did you still play at all after 12? Jonas asked. Occasionally, his mother replied, but it didn't seem as important to me. I did, his father said, laughing. I still do. Every day at the nurturing center, I play bounce on the knee and peekaboo and hug the teddy. He reached over and stroked Jonas's neatly trimmed hair. Fun doesn't end when you become a 12. Lily appeared, wearing her night clothes in the doorway. She gave an impatient sigh. This is certainly a very long private conversation, she said, and there are certain people waiting for their comfort object. Lily, her mother said fondly, you are very close to being an 8. And when you're an 8, your comfort object will be taken away. It will be recycled to the younger children. You should be starting to go off to sleep without it. But her father had already gone to the shelf and taken down the stuffed elephant, which was kept there. Many of the comfort objects, like Lily's, were soft, stuffed, imaginary creatures. Jonas's had been called a bear. Here you are, Lily Billy, he said. I'll come help you remove your hair ribbons. Jonas and his mother rolled their eyes, yet they watched affectionately as Lily and her father headed to her sleeping room with the stuffed elephant that had been given to her as her comfort object when she was born. His mother moved to her big desk and opened her briefcase. Her work never seemed to end, even when she was at home in the evening. Jonas went to his own desk and began to sort through his school papers for the evening's assignment. But his mind was still on December and the coming ceremony. Though he had been reassured by the talk with his parents, he hadn't the slightest idea what assignment the elders would be selecting for his future, or how he might feel about it when the day came. And that is the end of chapter 2.